All right. So we're on page, at least in my book, we're on page 74, a ketam found on a garment not susceptible to ritual purity. Last week we
Okay.
talked about ketamim and sizes, the size of a gris. And in the book, you'll see if you flip one page back, you'll see they have like actual grises drawn in, which is super fun. And this week we're going to talk about the surface that the ketam might be found on. So I'll start us off. Another limitation instituted with respect to the ordinance of Ketamim is that a stain found upon a garment that is not susceptible to ritual purity, a no mekabel tumah, does not render a woman ritually impure. This is expressed by Rabbi Nehemiah in the following Mishnah in Niddah. If they had sat on a stone bench or on the projection within the colonnade of a bathhouse, Rabbi Nehemiah says that they are pure. For Rabbi Nehemiah would say, anything that is not susceptible to uncleanness is not susceptible to stains. All right.
Rishonim disagree concerning the basis for this rule. According to Tosfot, the sages sought to create a uniform policy for the standards of Tuma. A Niddah is considered ritually impure and renders foods ritually impure, and the prohibition of being together with her husband. Thus, the blood renders the woman tameh only if it also confers Tuma to the surface upon which it is found.
So they're
So,
trying to make an equivalence between um, the type of tuma that's going to make your taharos tame and the type of tuma that's going to make you asr to your husband. So that's all one level playing field.
okay, so in accordance with Rabbi Nehemiah, the reason of Rabbi Nehemiah is that since the item upon which the stain is found, i.e., the stone, remains tahor, since stone surfaces do not become tame, so too the woman is not subjected to ritual impurity.
Rachel, we're on page 74, source 19. Can you hear us? Let's see if she's typing on the chat. No. I'm not sure if you're talking to us. You're muted, but I'm going to continue and you'll join us when you can. All right. However, the Ran takes a different approach. According to him, the fundamental basis for the ordinance of Ketamim is to ensure consistency. In order to ensure that people do not mistakenly think that if the woman is tahora after seeing a stain, then the garment is tahora as well, Chazal instituted the enactment of Ketamim. Since the entire basis for the enactment relates to issues of tuma and tahara of the garment, when a garment or other item does not become ritually impure, no ritual impurity was ordained for the woman either. Chidushei Aran, since a woman becomes ritually impure on a biblical level only if there is a hargasha, the impure status of stains is rabbinic alone in nature, and the ordinance was applied only to an item that is susceptible to impurity. Oh, sorry. Yeah. However, regarding an item that does not become ritually impure, it doesn't apply. The reason for this is that with regard to an item that is susceptible to impurity, since the article that is stained becomes impure, she is subject to the rabbinic ordinance so that people would not incorrectly treat the garment as being pure. But when the stain is found upon something that is not subject to impurity, they never decreed ritual impurity on her at all. So if you would find a stain on clothing and the woman would be tahor, but the garment would be tame, that would be very confusing. And you could see how that would lead to confusion and that could lead to mistakes. But if the garment is not tame, so then there's no reason to decree that the woman should be tame either. So that's where we are right now. We're on, anybody who's joining us, we're on page 75 in my book, which might be a little bit different in your book, but we're starting a section called Is Paper Susceptible to Tuma? So we just talked about the general idea of the surface that the stain being found on being significant, and now we're going to talk about a particular surface, namely paper. Rachel, can you hear us? You're good now? You're muted. You're muted, but
I can hear you. We connected my headphones. We're
yay!
good.
I'm so glad. All right. Do you want to start us off on this next section? Do you have your
I do. Sure. Just I am. Which page are we on?
where I'm on page 75. Is paper susceptible to tuma? The middle of page 75. I'm not sure if you have the
Yep.
exact same. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. Okay. Okay. Starting from the
The
aside from
intro.
clothing.
Yeah. The little yellow
Okay.
intro.
Is paper susceptible to tuma? aside from clothing and examination cloths, a woman is most likely to discover possible signs of discharge blood on a variety of paper hygiene products, including toilet and tissue paper. Thus, it is pivotal to determine if paper is subject to ritual impurity and whether seeing a blood stain on such a surface renders a woman ritually impure. The Noddah B'Yehuda holds that paper is susceptible to ritual impurity since it is fabricated from other materials that are susceptible to impurity, namely worn fabrics, rags, and compressed plant fibers. The responsa of Noddah B'Yehuda, second edition, Yoredea 105. Should I continue?
Please, yeah, read the responsa and then we'll...
Okay. Regarding a woman who finds a stain on paper, it must be determined whether it is tamei because the rule of a stain does not apply when it appears upon an item that is not subject to impurity. The questioner writes that paper in Chazal's times, which was made from grass, was subject to impurity of leprosy, and therefore it is also susceptible to stains. This primary question relates to modern paper, which is made from worn rags. Now the exalted questioner's doubt is resolved. Paper made from grass, and certainly that which is made from worn rags, is subject to impurity.
Beautiful. So let's look at footnote number 9. I found it pretty helpful. Paper is made from cellulose fibers, the materials which make up the cell walls of plants. Until the end of the 18th century, paper was handmade by artisans, and industrial machines for the mass production of paper were invented only in the early 19th century. When paper is handmade, it is produced from fibrous materials, as in scraps of woven materials and plant waste. The fibers are separated through either beating or scraping, after which the raw materials are immersed in water or other dissolvents. A mesh wire is immersed into the mixture, and this catches a thin substance. In turn, this is dried and immersed in glue, and the resultant product is paper. This same process is still in use today for some of the highest quality papers, including paper for currency or for use in art. Today, common paper is made from wood chips without being combined with fibers from fabrics, but in the 18th century and early 19th centuries, when the Noddah B'Yehuda and Khatam Sofer were written, it was very common to use worn rags in making paper as reflected in their responsa. So I think that's really important to understand about this whole discussion. Tehila, you are muted and your video is off, so we're going to assume that you're just listening from somewhere else, and we'll continue. But if you are available to read, we would love to have you join us. All right. Deborah,
Thank you. I don't have the text in front of me, or I'd be happy to read.
All good. All good. We're glad you're here. Is it me or you, Deborah? I can't remember.
Depends if that footnote counts as reading or not.
Oh, that's true. I'll count it as reading. You go.
Okay. I'll go ahead. The Khatam Sofer adopts the opposing view that paper is not susceptible to tuma. He explains that since paper is produced by a complicated process, the paper is considered a wholly new entity, irrespective of its primary components. Responsa Khatam Sofer, Volume 6, Likutim 81. I will cite my gloss to Shulchan Aruch, see the work Sidrei Tahara here, who writes that paper is not subject to tuma or to blood stains, and the Chochmat Adam writes similarly. The reason appears to be that its status as a product parallels the status of dung, which even though it comes from food, it does generate tuma nonetheless. Now that it has become disgusting and decomposed, the tuma has departed from it. The same is true of paper, which has been compressed to very thin pieces and dissolved in water and changed into something new. The status of wool or linen has departed it. Moreover, it appears to me that only those materials which stand to be used for garments, weaving, ropes, fabrics, or the like have the status of wool or flax, but papers, which are earmarked for other uses, do not.
So it's interesting. He has a number of arguments trying to distinguish between the components of paper and the results of paper, right? So the first is that it's now a totally different object. You would never recognize it. And I feel like there are examples of that in other areas of halacha. Also, for example, we talk about gelatin. Is it still connected to the fish or the bones or whatever it was that was the kashrut problem? Or is it now a totally separate, unrecognizable, unrelated new product? And I think that's part of the issue, right? So there are other applications of this, and certainly the Tuma Tahara application, what he talks about here, is highly significant. And he also talks about the fact that it's used for something different. It's not just that it looks different or it is unrelated, but it's actually a totally different application of this product. Contemporary poskim have disputed. Sorry, I'm totally stealing your spot, Rachel.
No problem. Can you grab his sleep sack from my bed, please? Um, what? That's his sleeper. His sleep sack is the thing that I wrap him in. Contemporary postgame have disputed the status of modern paper as well. According to the Darchei Tahara, modern paper is also not susceptible to tuma, though he notes that since some disagree, one should consult a halachic authority in such a case. The Darchei Tahara, the following are the most common surfaces that may become stained by a discharge of blood, yet are not susceptible to tuma. The ground and everything that is permanently attached to it. This includes a house, a door, a toilet seat, and the like. However, movable furniture, including tables and chairs, are not included in this category. Paper and strips of cotton. However, some say that if a woman sees a discharge on paper or wool, she must consult an authority, and that is a prevalent practice. Continue.
We will give it to, I don't know why I'm having so much trouble following. I think I'm talking too much, and then I keep feeling like I haven't read. All right, I'm going to go. Rav Moshe Feinstein in Response Igrot Moshe and Rav Ovadia Yosef in Taharat Habayit hold that one who discovers a stain on paper is definitively not impure. Taharat Habayit HaKatzar, if a woman discovers a stain upon paper without having experienced a hargasha, for instance, if she sits on paper and discovers a blood stain on it when she gets up, or if she discovers blood on paper after using it to wipe herself externally, she remains tahora. This is so because paper is not susceptible to tuma. Devorah, I'm handing it over to you.
Okay. Rav Yitzchak Mordechai Rubin comments in his Sefer Mara Kohen that the commonly accepted halacha among Ashkenazim is in accordance with the Chatam Sofer, that a stain on paper does not render a woman impure. However, he qualifies that one who discovers a stain of blood on a piece of toilet paper when wiping after relieving herself should not automatically be lenient, but rather consult a halachic authority. So Mara Cohen, chapter 3, page 29, the Achronim dispute if paper is to be considered a material that is susceptible to tuma. According to the Nota B'Yehuda, paper is susceptible to tuma, but according to the Chatam Sofer, paper is not susceptible to tuma. With respect to practical halacha, the opinion of the poskim is in accordance with the Chatam Sofer. However, if a woman discovers a stain of blood when she wipes herself, for instance, after she urinates, she should not rush to be lenient like when finding a stain on regular paper. Rather, she should hold on to the Mara and consult an authority.
Do you remember when we talked about urinating a couple of classes ago, right? And that the Gemara talks about how that might mask a hargasha. So you can see why you'd be much more careful about wiping after peeing than, let's say, the example above where she sat down on a piece of paper and when she got up, there was blood on it, right? I'm even thinking if you went to a doctor's appointment, right? And you're wearing those little hospital gowns and you're sitting on paper, and if you get up and there's something under you, that's very different from peeing and wiping, right? There's a much higher likelihood of something being masked when you're peeing. All right. Where are we? Rabbi Binyamin Forst explains that the complexity of the question of finding blood on toilet paper after urination is that perhaps the woman experienced a hargasha while relieving herself, of which she was unaware, rendering her impure on a deoraita level, in which the leniencies of Ketamim cannot apply. Nevertheless, he notes that many authorities are lenient. Rabbi Binyamin Forst the laws of Niddah. However, a woman who found a stain on toilet tissue, which she used to clean herself, should ask a shaila. Footnote 48, there may have been a hargasha at the time, which she mistook for a sensation of urination. Common custom among Rabbanim is to be lenient regarding a red stain less than a gris found on toilet tissue. Others are lenient even if the stain is more than a gris, since paper is not makabel tuma. And Devorah, I'll pass to you.
Okay. One of the lenient authorities is Rav Moshe Feinstein, who explains that as long as she waited a short time before wiping herself, she may be lenient if the stain is less than a gris. So in response to Igrot Moshe, if she did not hurry to wipe after urinating, but rather sat and waited until all the drops emerged, and then wiped and found blood, but did not sense any hargasha, it is treated as a stain. And she does not need to think that perhaps it was the sensation of urination, but really it was a hargasha of blood, since when the blood was found, all of the urine had already emerged. Therefore, she certainly did not experience a hargasha, and she only becomes impure when the size is more than a gris.
Rachel, you okay? to read,
Yeah,
or
I'm good.
I see you have your hands full of good things.
Rav Tzvi Sokolovsky, a Rosh Yeshiva at Reitz, um, also writes in his work, The Laws and Concepts of Niddah, that there is significant room for leniency concerning this question. Rabbi Tzvi Sokolovsky, The Laws and Concepts of Niddah, page 45. Although some poskim are less inclined to be lenient regarding toilet paper, a lenient attitude towards this issue is legitimate and consistent with the rabbinical character of the decree of the decree of Ketamim, which indicates a lenient approach to most issues in this area.
So hopefully this is sounding very familiar to you, right? Like we talked about the idea of the mass targasha. We talked about the fact that within Ketamim we have a mandate to be lenient. Like there are a lot of things that I hope are starting to come together for you and refer to things that actually are familiar. So the one thing I would just want to point out on a practical level is Nishmat's policy of trying to wait 15 seconds from finishing peeing from the where is it? All of the urine had already emerged, as Rav Moshe says, to wiping. And that distance, even 15 seconds, even a little bit, not 15 seconds is not necessarily a hard and fast rule, but more of a suggestion that will definitely be fine, but even less of a break will also be helpful and will really make it easier for us to be lenient on toilet paper. So that's something just to put in the back of your head as a practical tip. But that's obviously there are different opinions, as we just saw, etc., etc. All right. Pads and hygienic cloths. What is the status of hygienic pads and cloths? On the one hand, their status should be similar to paper. On the flip side, however, since they are fashioned specifically to serve a particular function, it might be argued that they are susceptible to tuma more than paper. Rav Ovadia Yosef takes a lenient position in his Mishmeret HaTahara, printed alongside his work Taharat HaBayit. Mishmeret HaTahara, Volume 1, 8-9. Cotton is not susceptible to tuma. If a woman lays a thin piece of cotton in her undergarments such that it will absorb any discharges and subsequently discovers a stain larger than a gris upon it, it appears that she remains tahora. This conforms to the principle of a stain seen on an article that is not susceptible to tuma. Similarly, it seems that one may be lenient with respect to the thick absorbent paper that many women place in their undergarments, i.e., a pad, such that if a stain larger than a gris is discovered upon it without a hargasha, the woman remains tahora. Deborah.
Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach also writes in a letter published in the journal Tzohar, Volume 20, that a pad is not susceptible to tuma, as explained by Rav Ovadia Yosef in the previous source, even after it is placed in an undergarment. Because the pad is earmarked for later removal and disposal, it never loses its distinct identity and status vis-a-vis the undergarment. However, a number of other poskim, including Rav Mordechai Eliyahu, Rav Shmuel Wozner, and Rav Nissim Karlitz, take a stringent position that a hygienic pad, paper, cotton, and the like are all susceptible to tuma. In their opinion, a woman who sees a blood stain on them that is larger than a gris would be impure. Shirei Shevet Halevi, Siman 190, 10.3. Cotton does not seem to be susceptible to tuma according to Torah law. Accordingly, if a woman places cotton outside her body in a position to absorb discharges and a stain is discovered there, she remains tahora. However, practically speaking, it appears proper to be stringent. Mara Cohen, chapter 3, page 30. 6. Some women place a specialized cloth called a pad in their undergarments. The opinion of the great poskim is to be stringent with respect to a stain found on a pad. This falls in line with the stain found on any article or surface which is susceptible to tuma. Note 32, I have heard this from Rav Wozner and Rav Nissim Karlitz. 7. In the market today, there are disposable undergarments, and here too, the opinion of the great poskim is to be stringent and to treat any stain found thereupon as a ketem on an article that is susceptible to tuma. I've heard this from Rav Wozner and Rav Karlitz. Darkei Tahara, chapter 2, responsa and additions 9. Question, how should one conduct oneself when seeing a stain upon toilet paper, a pad, or cotton? Answer, in my opinion, they are all susceptible to tuma because each constitutes a proper kli, utensil, or instrument.
Thank you. Okay, so there are another two sections that go together. I don't know if we are going to get through them in 7 minutes. So I'm wondering if we should maybe stop here. We talked about things that are not makabel tuma, and then next time we'll talk about stains found on something colored. which is another one of the categories, but not really related. So I think we'll take a break here and early, get off early for Hanukkah. And I'm going to post a poll, Bezrat Hashem, on the chat just to see whether people want to meet next week during Hanukkah or whether it's too complicated with everybody home and traveling and whatever else is going on in your life. So Bezrat Hashem, I will post that and then we'll figure out either we'll meet next week or in 2 weeks, I think. Or I guess in 3 weeks if people want to take the whole winter break off. I don't know. All right. We'll figure that out in a poll. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful Hanukkah.